So hi, I am Josh, and this is the Pelargia Podcast. Let's see who we've got in here today. It looks like we've got a few people already watching. What's up, AJ? How's it going? You were the first person to drop in the chat. You get a prize. A high five next time I see you. So, for those of you guys who don't know, I've been trying to set up this for a very long time, or something like it. This is going to be a live streaming podcast on Twitch for all things Tolkien. So we're going to cover the movies, the books, the manuscripts, the scholarly kind of crossovers. We're going to be talking about everything from games to art to music to history to literature. I have so much to tell you guys about the culture of everything that we're trying to build. But I don't want to be rude because our first guest is just waiting to be introed. So I'm going to go ahead and transition to that, and then him and I together will talk about what we're doing here on the Pelargia Podcast and what we are talking about today. So I'm going to go ahead and get into an intro. So our first guest today is a very good friend of mine, and I am so happy that he is going to be joining me for our first stream today. Apologies for being late. First time getting everything set up is a little stressful, so thank you guys for waiting. Thank you guys for being patient. We'll be on for a while, so sit back and relax. This is going to be a wonderful time. Our first guest today, very good friend of mine. He is a pastor. He works with children and families. Him and I first met together when we were both going to school for that. He's also an incredibly talented young man who pretty much was born to be on the stage. He's got a flair for the dramatic. He's an incredible storyteller. He's also the best D&D DM I have ever seen. His ability to create characters, scenarios, adventures, content, while all the time staying focused on having the people who participate with him get the most out of the experience that they possibly can. It's just incredible. He's also annoyingly attractive. Basically, think Flynn Rider if he was a nerd. But we'll get into that in a minute. So without any further introductions, we'll go ahead and jump in and see if I can jump to throwing him up on screen. Please, everybody, welcome. Oh, I'm so sorry. No, that's not him. No.
I wish it was me.
Actually, that's what happens. So I was trying to figure out a way to describe him, and I was basically like, think Flynn Rider or Tulio from The Road to El Dorado, but if he was a nerd. So
AI generated?
I went into an AI generator, and all I typed was combinations of Flynn Rider nerd glasses stubble. And with no other prompts, this is what I got. So this was the first result, which, was promising, but I kind of thought that if I just refreshed it a little bit more, again, no other prompts other than Nerd Flynn Rider and either stubble or glasses. So as we progressed, it started getting a little scarier. A little bit terrifying, not going to lie. Again, this is, I believe, just Nerd Flynn Rider Stubble. I did not change the titles on any of these. Then we have Nerd Flynn Rider Stubble Glasses again, except a little bit more accurate. Not gonna lie. I think my favorite one though is coming up, which is absolutely terrifying. So this is, I believe, Nerd Flynn Rider Stubble, but picture Matt in about 10 years. There we go. Again, no other prompts. No other prompts except for Nerd Flynn Rider Stubble. So I'm just.
I wish I would have done my hair.
I'm just saying today. It's kind of so. With that, without further ado, everybody, please welcome Mr. Matt Lema. Where is he? There he is. Hey, I'm just saying, man.
I can't twist my mustache as well as those pictures have. That's not fair.
How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing very well. I'm honored to be here for your first stream, my friend. This is going to be a good time.
I told you it was in good fun. I'm going to send you those. I hope. I hope you know.
I'll take them. You got to help me convince my wife to trim my beard like that. I've shaved it down like in a way that's manageable, and it feels good to be able to have it thin. But I appreciate the description of Flynn Rider Nerd Stubble. Those were pretty darn close. They really were.
I'm just saying.
Very close.
I was trying to figure out a way how to say it in the intro where it's like, this is a man who is so annoyingly handsome, but at the same time, it's the only person I know who is so, but it's balanced. It's balanced out entirely by how insanely kind and compassionate and wonderful-hearted he is. So, like, I don't hold it against him at all.
Thank you.
He's one of the best people I know. So I will stop gushing, and why don't you, Matt, tell us just a little bit about yourself, but then we're gonna stop that and then jump into what the podcast is about. But first, just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Like you said, I am a pastor as well. I'm a licensed reverend down in Indiana. I'm close to the Indianapolis area on the west side of the city. I've been down here for about 5 years, but I grew up in Wisconsin and met Josh in college. We were fantastic roommates and immediate friends as soon as we met each other. It was very, very fun. Those years were fantastic. I have not met a fanatic of Lord of the Rings quite as much as Mr. Levenhagen. And I'm very excited for what he's going to be able to produce and to be a part of this with you guys. But I think for me, I am a Lord of the Rings enjoyer, right? I'm a Tolkien. I call myself a fan, but I'm one of the but I'm not quite a fringe fan either. Like, I know more than your average person, but also I've only read the books once, and a lot of it has like gone over my head, and so I only remember bits and pieces of it. And so I'm excited to be here, but also a little intimidated. So I'm going to play the part of the student, and you be the professor, okay? You teach me, scholar.
No, any other areas besides just strictly Tolkien, though, that's my thing. That's about it. I got. I will say Matt is being incredibly humble, though, because on all things D&D, and to be honest, a lot of things RPG and gaming and all the other things like that, he is quite the expert. So I'm excited to hear from you on those issues, and I will happily take the back seat to those as well.
Sounds good.
So, I do not recognize we got AJ jumped in here, but the Fear Merchant, I have not seen anybody, any of my previous followers of that name. So welcome. Thank you for jumping in. So I was thinking, why don't we go ahead and transition to talking a little bit about the podcast?
For sure.
So
what do we got going on here?
So yeah, what I'm going to do is I'm going to minimize you so that I can. Look at that, man. All right, let's see if it's going to let me do this. Because I suddenly just realized
if you guys want to donate to Josh's stream so that he can get a computer that can run OBS, let's do it. Because,
I am not monetizing. I'm not at all. So it looks like I'm just going to have to be sharing my screen, Matt, because we'll learn how to do pop-ups later. Because I don't want to...
Okay, sounds good.
So, well, first of all, I figured we'd talk about Pelargir. The Pelargir podcast.
Yes.
So what is Pelargir? So... Here, what we have here is an unofficial, because I'm a big fan of talking about things that are official and unofficial. In the Tolkien world, there are a lot of different degrees of things, shall we say. I am very much against gatekeeping, but there are a lot of different levels of content that you can find, and some of them are more accurate than others. So when it comes to maps, it's kind of weird. There's only a handful of maps, really, that Tolkien himself or Christopher Tolkien drew. So what you'll have is, if someone has drawn one of his maps to a very high level of accuracy, that's great, but it's hard to determine that based on some specific sources. So, like, you'll Google... a map of Middle-earth, and there's going to be a million different people who've created their own versions of the maps of Middle-earth, and you'll run into ones where it's just like, wait, whoa, that's completely off. So this one is one of the only high-def, zoomable ones I could find to use for showing where Pelargir is. and it is fairly accurate. There's mostly it's simple things that are cosmetic differences, and it is a little bit more stretched out from side to side than so the aspect ratio is just a tiniest bit off for the original maps that Tolkien drew. It's really funny if you look at the maps in the books. It's almost as if I don't think he did it on purpose, but it's almost as if Middle Earth was meant to fit on an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, like upright in a book. I wonder
about that too. But like when it comes to the history of scale in his maps, did he draw his maps artistically on purpose, not to scale? Were they to scale, as if a traveler would be using them in his world?
Fun fact, actually, Tolkien, I think it's merely a fluke that they fit into the books. But because especially he was so much obsessed with his maps that he drew the maps before he wrote the stories.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Classic world building.
No, very, very much so. Like, in his mind, he said it didn't make any sense to draw the map as you went, because then you had no idea where the characters were going, or to draw the map after you had finished the story, and then have all of the readers look at the map and go, well, that's stupid. They could have just done it this way. And they'd be right, because the writer wouldn't know until he finished the map. So he drew his maps very much so before he ever wrote the stories. Actually, I'll pull it up sometime when we do an episode about maps. I have an image of one of the first times he ever drew Beleriand from the first age, and it was on a sheet of notebook paper. And it was hilarious, the fact that he was just grabbing a sheet of scratch paper and working on it. But anyway, so here we have Middle Earth, and something else we have to remember. So if you were looking at a map from 500 years ago, would you expect it to be accurate?
I guess not. Well, from 500 years ago, our time, or
Tolkien's
world? I guess you'd expect it to be decently accurate as far as where landmarks are placed. I'm not much of a cartographer. I draw cartoony things for Dungeons and Dragons and for other RPG.
But even think about just 500 years ago, the maps of the New World.
I guess not. If you're thinking back to like the colonial times, even a couple thousand, like they were accurate enough in scope, but certainly not in scale.
So Tolkien takes the role of the scholarly editor rather than the author. So when he gives us maps, it's generally assumed that they are accurate to the sense of whoever drew them knew what they were doing. But landmarks actually change over time in his stories. So I'll give you an example. So let's see if it will let me do this. If we zoom in here on Eriador, there we go. If you zoom in here on Eriador, the lower part of it near the Enedwaith and the Dunland. So Eriador up here, if you look up here at the top of the screen, this is the Barrow Downs, where the Barrow Wights just about killed Frodo and the hobbits. So down here to the south, you have Isengard right here. So here's the Gap of Rohan. So the Gap of Rohan is the only way, besides the several passes through the mountains, that you can get from west to east. So this whole area right here, if you're looking at the Third Age, this makes perfect sense. Because here's Fangorn Forest right there. And, so you see they went down following through the Anduin River. So they went and they tried to find, the hobbits, and they went through Fangorn, and they went down here to Rohan. This makes sense for the Third Age. In the Second Age, you'll see maps from the Second Age, and they'll be like, oh, this is a map of the Second Age. And be like, actually, Tolkien, to my knowledge, never drew a map from the Second Age. So the problem with that is... So
they were all artistic interpretations of
pretty much
the literature about
the
Second Age.
Or just reprints of the Third Age map. Because if you were going to look at the Second Age is when the Númenóreans first started coming up here onto the coast. They cut down a forest that covered this entire area. So various different versions of this map will show trees in different spots, but the general acceptance is that Fangorn used to stretch all the way out here, possibly all the way to the mouth of all the way out to the end of the Eisen River, and it had been cut down. So if you were seeing a real Second Age map, there should be trees here, but no one's drawn them in because Tolkien didn't, and neither did his son. So it's like we're not allowed to change that. Whatever we have, whatever we have is what we have. And Christopher Tolkien actually took that extremely seriously. He drew a bunch of the maps while his father was still alive. But once his father was gone, it's kind of one of those, I can imagine what it would look like, but J.R.R. Tolkien is not here to approve it, so it just never got made. So we can imagine a lot of that. So interestingly enough, this is relevant when we're talking about Pelargir. So let's see if I can zoom over here. So here we have Rohan,
Pelargir,
and here we have Gondor. So here we got Rohan up here on the north side of the mountains. We have Gondor here on the south. Gondor once extended to all of this, all the way even up here. But over the years it declined, and then I believe in the Third Age, trying to remember how many years into the Third Age, but Rohan basically took custody of this area for Gondor. So Gondor had declined by the time of the Third Age, and its main focus of strength kind of started receding in towards this area right here. So like it did have reach, but its main population was kind of receding, even to the point where Ithilien, which is right up here, was becoming depopulated because of Sauron. So Pelargir is right down here. It is a port city
on the river?
On the river.
Ah.
So I'm going to scoot it over here so you can see better. So there is Minas Tirith. We got Minas Tirith right up there, and then Osgiliath, obviously, on the river. And again, we're still on the Anduin. And it flows down here, and then we've got the river that it also sits on. So it's a port city on a river that flows into the Bay of Belfalas. And here you have the rocky island of Tolfalas. And here you've got the delta. This is drawn any number of ways. And to be honest, one of the ways you can check to see if a map is accurate is pull up an accurate map, one of the originals from the books, and compare this bay and this river delta and the size of Tolfalas. Compare that to whatever map that you're looking at. The other really, really easy way, just going to be ADHD for a second and tell you another really, really easy way to see if a map is accurate. See how they portray the East Bight in Mirkwood. Okay. So this one is a little weird. The East Bight, you see it kind of cinches. The East Bight is the Northmen basically cut down all those trees and were using them to build their homes. And at some point in time they crossed over and they started living in this area near the Gladden Fields. So the East Bight in some maps is like, wait, what is that? Like, what the heck? So if you look at it in any of his original maps, I can pull it up, but it'll just take a second. I'll show you some other time. We'll do a maps episode. It should be a little bigger than this, and sometimes they'll show it and it'll be a little wonky shaped. It literally should look like almost a straight up rectangle just pulled out of it and stuff like that. So there's a few wonky maps floating around where the East Bight is too close to the bottom. This veers too far out this way. So Mirkwood is a really good way to also tell how good a map is.
Integrity of the map is Mirkwood Forest and the Delta by Belfalas Bay. Okay.
Yeah, that's actually a very quick way to do it. But this one seems fairly accurate. The Bight does look a little small, but it is better than a lot of them I've seen. It's not one of the truly wonky ones. So Pelargir is a port city. You may see it actually briefly in the movies. I've got a picture. Let's see. See if I can pull up a...
Yeah, what made you decide to name this podcast the Pelargir Podcast?
So,
What's special about Pelargir?
Well, one of the things is that it is a port city on a river that flows into the Bay of Belfalas and then into the ocean. And I live in Wisconsin. That's where this podcast is coming to you from. And I live in the city of Racine, Wisconsin. and Racine is a port city on a river that flows into Lake Michigan. So if you go down to, we used to have what was considered the best harbor in the state. So there are just boats everywhere, and all the bridges that go up when the river comes out through them, and super scenic and beautiful right on Lake Michigan. So I thought, Pelargir sounds nice. We're not Milwaukee, we're not, but we're not a big giant city, but at the same time, it's a city that means a lot to the people of Wisconsin in history-wise.
Yes, it does.
It has some beautiful sights. It's had a lot of struggles in the past with the automotive industry, but it reminded me a lot of Pelargir, and I love the image of the Men of the West, the Númenóreans, and their architecture, and this idea of boats going up and down the river from Minas Tirith to the sea. I just thought it was a cool image. But also, I like the fact that, here, let me zoom out. It has to do with what I am doing with the podcast. So, Mr. Matt, have you are familiar with the Tolkien Society?
I am familiar, but I'm not a part of it.
So the Tolkien Society...
I know...
Yeah. What were you going to say?
Oh, I was just going to say, I know that they're very keen on keeping the integrity of Tolkien's original intention for his work alive.
Yes. Here's what I'm going to try and do. I'm going to try and minimize you on this screen, and then just bring in... Hey, now I can do it. Good. Yeah. Now we get to have your face on the stream. I'm just busy talking about
It's not that pretty.
I was busy talking about
It's really not that pretty.
I was talking about your face, and then your face was hidden, and it was making me sad. I'm sorry, I keep messing with you. Okay,
hey,
let's see.
I'll take compliments about how pretty I am all day. I really will.
Good. I don't understand how to pop you up in front of my photos. I don't
know. You're using a Mac, brother. I don't do that.
Oh, well, there's your face.
I don't do that.
Oh, that. Now, this is a little pixelated because that's way bigger than the version of the picture that I've got. But that is
good to me, though.
A good painting of Pelargir.
Uh-huh.
And I love the image. Now, the Tolkien Society was founded. It actually has J.R.R. Tolkien as its president emeritus. But the Tolkien Society was basically founded for people to, basically take care of Tolkien's work, to enthuse about it, to study it, it's like what would happen if academics started a fan club.
Sure.
So it is kind of sort of like a fan club, but I don't like that word, and I'll talk to you about that in a minute. But yeah, so the Tolkien Society is got chapters all over the world, and when they meet together, they have people do presentations, essays, write articles, talk about more academic assessments of some of his themes and his plots and the various different things. And yes, they're very, very much passionate about preserving his work, about safeguarding his work, and also about promoting his work to new generations so that people understand just how important he was and his work was to our modern society, because he was one of probably the most influential author of the 20th century when it came to kind of revolutionizing how we looked at high fantasy and everything that came after that. According to some lists, he was listed as the most influential author of the 20th century, like the author of the century, and Lord of the Rings was the book of the century.
Sure.
So yeah, it's cool. Yeah, super cool. So one of the reasons I picked that Pelargir was the fact that the Tolkien Society has what's called smiles, which is a word that was the word Smeagol was actually derived from it, and it means burrow or hole. So smiles are meant to be small groups of Tolkien Society members all over the world. So there is no American, like, USA Tolkien Society, but what there are is smiles of the Oxford, England Tolkien Society. And they are all over the world. I talked to a gentleman from Germany, and he just said there are hundreds of members, hundreds and hundreds of members. And he said there's dozens and dozens of smiles just in Germany alone. Here in North America, there are far less. And the difficulty is lately the Tolkien Society has had a difficult time. They don't, currently, last time I checked, they do not have a smile coordinator. So it's very hard to become an official group. So we had 2 here in Wisconsin. We had one in Madison and we had one in Milwaukee. Currently, I do not see that either one of them are active. But when they become so, I'll be happy to. I'd love to connect with them. So in the meantime, I was like, you know what? I'm going to put my own group together, and maybe we can get to enough people where we can actually go places and do things. I found it a kind of a crying shame that a lot of people don't know. Wisconsin, here in the United States, has the second largest collection of Tolkien manuscripts in the world.
Really? Where are they housed right now?
Marquette.
Okay.
So Marquette University is a Catholic university and up in Milwaukee, and they have, if I'm not mistaken, something like 9,000 pages of Tolkien's manuscripts from The Lord of the Rings.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I did have a chance to, I'll probably do an episode on that. I did have a chance to actually go there and see the latest exhibition of that work alongside of the Bodleian Library in Oxford, put up more of Tolkien's work in alongside it, so that people could be introduced more to Tolkien's and Tolkien's work. And it was more on the scholarly side of things, trying to show you how much of his work was inspired by his academic work, what he actually did for a living. So that was really, really cool. But yeah,
what was his academic field? He was a historian, and he studied cultures and Norse mythology, and
so he studied all of that. But his actual job was a professor of Anglo-Saxon at Oxford. So he studied a lot of different things. He studied a lot of medieval history and literature. So yes, he especially studied he studied Norse mythology, he studied Anglo-Saxon history and culture and literature. He was also a philologist, which came into his job. A philologist is someone who studies the evolution of languages.
Oh, that's cool.
So he studied how languages evolved over time. So a lot of the stuff that I got to see displayed was things like, he is known for one of the first and one of the best translations of the epic of Beowulf into English and from poetry to prose.
Cool.
It is not considered like the definitive, but it is definitely one of those. If you are studying Beowulf for a class, it will come up Tolkien's translation, which is wonderful. So yeah, actually it's funny. One of his original origin stories for where all of this stuff that he got that was supposedly written down and he found and turned into the Lord of the Rings by translating it. One of his original origin stories was that it was brought back by someone who'd visited the elves and gave it to the man who wrote Beowulf.
Aha.
So he abandoned that origin story. That is not a thing anymore.
I believe it.
But that was, it was very much tied into a lot of the stuff that he did. I loved seeing all of that. I think in very many ways Tolkien was not a writer in the sense that a lot of modern writers, especially fiction writers, are. Like, sure. He wanted to make these things for himself. He did not set out to write a story, have it published, and make money off of it. That's not what his original goal was. He had his own job, he had his own stuff, and I think he wanted to share his things with the world, what he had made, but he set out to make this stuff for himself. He'd written the Silmarillion, he wrote the Silmarillion, he started writing the Silmarillion decades before The Hobbit was ever written.
And that was a question I had: is what's the order of what he wrote? How did he start to get to where what we know today?
I think we're gonna have to do that one on a different episode. I'm pretty sure.
Okay,
because that's a lot. But
I know I certainly was not introduced to J.R.R. Tolkien in the order that he wrote his literature.
Nobody was.
Right. I think I was introduced to him the way that as his writing evolved, that he wanted the reader to be introduced. So my first ever Tolkien experience was listening to The Hobbit on audio via tapes that my father had.
Oh, what? So that's so cool.
We would listen to The Hobbit, the first audio recordings of it. Well, actually, I don't know if it was the first or not, but that was my first experience. Was my dad was like, "Hey, let's listen to these together," and I was too young to really understand how cool the novelty of that was, but remembered loving hearing the story. And so I was introduced to The Hobbit first, and then after The Hobbit, the movies, Lord of the Rings. Well, the animated series. I remember watching the Hobbit animated movie and then the animated Lord of the Rings series. And then I read the books and then I saw the movies. And so I just remember all of it, me thinking about how awesome this was, but a lot of it going way over my head. And I have to imagine that's not the order in which he wrote his literature whatsoever. It didn't come. Hobbit was not first. I know that.
Well, it was the first published. He did publish some other papers, and I believe some of his poems were originally published first. But if you're talking about the world of Middle Earth, of Arda, The Hobbit was definitely the first one published. It was not the first one written. The Silmarillion was absolutely written first. Because he started writing that, I believe, as early as I believe it was 1916, 1917.
Wow.
Yeah, so I believe he was in World War One. I don't have all the information just popped up in front of me, it's just what I remember from memory. But he was in World War One, and he got sick. And had several bouts of sickness, actually. And so he ended up coming home, and when he was in the hospital, if I'm not mistaken, that's when he started writing them down. But there's different accounts depending on who you ask, and depending on Tolkien's own letters. Because sometimes you'll read one of his letters, and it'll say 1916, 1917, and then even if you read what Christopher Tolkien writes about him, he'll even say some stuff. Now, I will say, the answers to a lot of that stuff is in the series The History of Middle-earth by Christopher Tolkien.
Sure. And
The History of Middle-earth is 13 volumes.
Oh, wow. That's a big project.
So he wrote that from the 1980s through the 1990s. I have not read The History of Middle-earth yet. So, I'm sure that there will be more specifics of when, but either way, we do know that he wrote the Silmarillion first.
Gotcha.
And then The Hobbit was, if I'm not mistaken, The Hobbit was actually partially a challenge from C.S. Lewis to write a kid's book.
Interesting.
Yeah, because people don't know. It's kind of a basic level fact about Tolkien, but Tolkien was part of a group called the Inklings, which was a group of men who would meet regularly at the pub, and they would talk about a lot of things. And they were writers, and several of them scholars and teachers as well. And one of them was C.S. Lewis, the guy who wrote the Chronicles of Narnia. And for people in the theology world, he was also I guess you could call him a Christian thinker, philosopher a little bit.
That's probably the best way to put it. He was an apologist. C.S. Lewis at least became an apologist because of J.R.R. Tolkien's influence on him. I did remember that.
Yes. So yeah, he definitely was. He became a Christian actually because of Tolkien. And what's really funny though is Tolkien was a Catholic. And for whatever reasons that C.S. Lewis had, I don't know, he always did things the way he wanted to do them for the reasons he wanted to do them. When he converted, he was an atheist, and when he converted to Christianity, he joined the Church of England, and J.R.R. Tolkien was, lifelong annoyed at him for doing that. He could just be like, I led you to become a Christian, and you joined the Church of England when I'm a Catholic. Seriously?
Well, there you go.
But, yeah. But if I'm not mistaken, it was C.S. Lewis who urged him to write a children's book. So when he wrote The Hobbit, that's why The Hobbit is set so many thousands of years after the Silmarillion, so that it wouldn't mess. His idea was that it wouldn't mess anything up.
That makes sense.
So, like, because his hope was, maybe sometime down the years in the future, somebody will be interested in reading the Silmarillion. And if they are, I won't have to, it won't have messed anything up, and I can keep The Hobbit kind of loosely tied to that world.
Yeah, it's still continuity without having to directly influence
Yeah.
That makes sense.
So that was 1937 was The Hobbit was finished, and then he immediately was like, okay, I did the thing. And then everybody was like, ah! And
they loved it.
Everybody loved it. Publishers are like, give us more. He's like, I have the Silmarillion. They're like, no, we don't want that. Give us more hobbits.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Like, so, no. We want what we want from you.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. That the world was like, hey, we don't want what you have. We want you to make something that we want. And he actually followed up with the challenge. That's kind of incredible to hear, honestly.
Yeah, it was. It's very interesting to get into, but we don't really have the time today. At least not right now. Okay, so I really have to exit out of those. Those every now and then it just pops up. I wanted to pull this in real quick. So this is Pelargir's Facebook page.
Ooh.
So this is Pelargir, the unofficial Racine smile of the Tolkien Society. So basically, this is where we'll be posting. We're like, look, I'm excited. I'm going to have Mr. Matt onto the video today.
Hey,
I couldn't help myself. It was the Tolkien.
I have them all pulled up. I have my previous ones from
oh,
when
you
I
do?
was even younger.
Okay, so you're gonna get into that.
For contact. Yeah,
you're gonna get into that.
Well, I can if we got time.
Okay,
It depends,
actually, go ahead and do that right now. I want everybody to hear about that. So
sure. So one of the ways that Josh and I became friends is we were talking about Lord of the Rings, right? And I said, hey, you should do this thing with me, because I had a friend in high school who said you should do this thing with me. I was a fan of Lord of the Rings, right? I had seen all the movies. I had played a bunch of the games as a kid. The Hobbit on Nintendo GameCube. I played the Third Age RPG. It was super fun. And like I had done a couple of those things, and so our friend Tyler Cowboy Muskevich was like, "Hey, you should come with me to this event." And I said, "Okay." It was a LARP up in Madison, Wisconsin, and I was like, "I don't know, man. I like this stuff, but I don't know if I'm gonna LARP. Like, am I gonna stoop that low?" And he's like, "No. Trust me, it's super fun. About 300 people every season. There's one in the spring, one in the fall. Get together to do this awesome event." Where everybody gets a character from the Lord of the Rings lore, and it's the good guys versus the bad guys. The hobbits and the men and the elves, they have to get the guy who's playing Frodo. He gets a physical ring, and he has to go 8.5 square miles across Governor Dodge State Park in Wisconsin.
Wait, that's how far it is?
Yeah, that's how far from start to finish.
No wonder I was so exhausted. Oh my god!
Yep, and so it's corner to corner, bottom corner to top corner of the play area. Governor Dodge is much bigger than 8.5 miles, but the play area was this corner to that corner. You have to go climb the tallest bluff at the state park, and you have to touch a goalpost, which is the fires of Mount Doom, and you have to literally throw the ring into the fires of Mount Doom in order for the good guys to win. If the good guys get caught by the bad guys. So you have 150 people on the other team. Actually, I think there was more. I think it was. We'd have to get Cowboy on here to talk about the Ring War, because he was way more into Ring War.
We'll do another episode because Ring War is still a thing.
It is still a thing. They do meet. COVID almost killed it, but not quite. And they're back. They meet every season.
Jack's out of the hospital.
So that picture in particular that you had up of me, I was Aragorn that year, and so I dressed like Elvis and told everybody it was the Return of the King. I had that.
I was trying to remember why. Yeah. I was trying to remember why you were slinging the guitar.
Yes, it was a spoof that I thought was way funnier than it actually was. I had the Gondorian tree on my back. I still have that leather jacket. I'll pull it out next time. But I still have the jacket. No, I've done it a couple times. I was a rider of Rohan the first year. I was Theoden for another one of the years. I was a white hand orc, and I was part of Saruman's army for one of the runs. It was super, super fun. But you did it with me that one year. You got to be a wraith, I think, right?
I did. You got pictures?
I do. Here, let me show you. Well, at least of the ones that I could find that were
just
old
let me
Facebook.
know. I'll switch to your stream when you're ready.
Okay, sounds good. I have to change streaming windows here. Give me 1 second.
No, you're good. Actually, you know what? While you're doing that, I want to wrap up some of the intro stuff real quick. Because we kind of were meandering a little bit. So basically, the point of this podcast is not content creation. As a matter of fact, there are plenty of content creators out there that do amazing stuff on Tolkien's lore, far better than I could put them out there. And there are also other people who stream on Twitch talking Tolkien. The Tolkien Professor actually is streaming on a couple of different channels, including on the Lotro mainstream, where he talks lore as well. And I will be jumping on, actually, it seems like I will be jumping on possibly to a couple of Lotro streams to talk Tolkien lore as well. So if you're looking for content, yeah, we're not... my main goal is not to be a content creator because there's a lot better and more awesome produced stuff out there. I do have a full-time job, so I'm not looking to replace that. I'm a minister just like Matt. But I work with the United Methodist Church here in Racine, and so I do children, youth, and family ministries. So that keeps me quite busy. This is a hobby. What I'm wanting to do is build community.
Yeah, let's do it.
Community over content creation. So the idea is friends and people that we've just met jumping up on the stream and being able to talk about all things Tolkien, getting into all areas. So community over content creation, and also resisting gatekeeping. Because the reality is that gatekeeping has become very much a thing among some areas of Tolkien enthusiasts, which is really funny because when you get to the level where I've had a chance randomly to meet some extremely high-level people into Tolkien, we're talking scholarly level, people who can understand and read and write and teach other people to read and write in Elvish and Anglo-Saxon, the actual real language Anglo-Saxon, well, non-fictional language Anglo-Saxon. And you get into that, and all of a sudden you're going, wait a minute, they're not angry, and they're not gatekeeping, and they're not holding this over anybody else's heads. They're excited. The highest level people into Tolkien are excited to share this with other people. And I think it's ridiculous that anybody should be anything else. We're going to be getting into all things related to them, including Magic the Gathering and D&D and any number of other things that are related to Tolkien's work. And we want everyone to feel welcome and no one to feel judged. We want to inspire more enthusiasm in people, which kind of leads to one of the last things, which is we kind of reject fan culture, period.
Sure.
I am not a fan of Tolkien. I call myself an enthusiast. Other official terms that you find on the internet are things like a Tolkienian, because I don't use the word fan because the word fan has been co-opted by a very entitled and consumeristic culture. The reality is Tolkien's work, more than anything else, is not owned by the fans. It's just not.
Right.
The Tolkien Society exists to safeguard his original visions and to promote his work. There are multiple scholars at work continuously publishing new books about his life and of his material, and his estate is fully active and running when it comes to safeguarding his work. So they have the right to do what they want to with his work. They do own it. So it's kind of this, sense. There's this balance where it's like gatekeeping is completely unnecessary and not helpful in the Tolkien world because his work isn't going anywhere.
Right.
It's not like they're going to have a new...
Staying.
It's not like in the Star Wars or Star Trek community where, it passes on to new owners and people write new stories that erase old stories.
Right.
That's not a thing. Tolkien's stories are bedrock. Like,
that makes sense.
They're not going anywhere. Do you enjoy all adaptations of his stuff? I don't. not all. Not all, and that's okay. But the cool thing to remember is at the end of the day, you can always turn it off or not buy it and go back and read the books because the books are never going anywhere, ever.
Sure.
You know,
sure.
and there's new ones that have just come out in the last 20 years. 5 new books have been added to the Legendarium of beautiful stories that a lot of people had not read and been waiting 50 years for. So it's like there's plenty happening in the Tolkien community. We don't need to worry about fan culture. We really don't need to worry about any of that toxicity. We're just here to be excited and to get other people excited.
Yeah, that's so cool.
Yeah, so that is the goal of this podcast, is to build community where basically we're going to have a series of guests and people can actually, once you have become a guest and be approved to be on the stream, if you're available anytime where there's another stream, you can pop in and actually say hi and just be a part of the community. And you do not have to have any level of expertise. All you have to do is have enthusiasm. So we're not, having...
That's me.
No, don't let them... This one has absolutely a lot of expertise, but you don't have to. All you have to do is have some excitement and want to talk about things that are Tolkien. So that's what we're going to be doing. You'll find our Discord and our Facebook linked into the Twitch page, and that is a way to stay connected with us and hang out with us. And if you are in the southeastern Wisconsin or Chicagoland area, we are hoping to get enough people in the group to put together live meetups. And among those, we'll transition back, is Ring War. So please continue, Mr. Matt. I'm so sorry.
Oh, you're good. No, that's really exciting. I know Ring War, we can get you contact information for the guys who put it on over at UW-Madison. They've been doing it for a very long time.
I just talked to Jack, actually. Just talked to Jack recently, so he's still doing it, and he's out of the hospital.
Impressive man. Yeah, the amount of energy that he has after all that he has gone through is like, I hope I have as much energy as him someday. It's pretty cool. But yeah, they do it twice a year, once in the spring, once in the fall. It has wavered between 150 to 300 to like 400-ish people, depending on what year it is and what the weather's like and what weekend is picked and all that. But it's a good time. And the people there are, I think like Josh said, enthusiasts as well. And they want to see more people get to enjoy what he has and experience it in a really, really fun way. So... yeah, my years were very fun when I was participating.
Can I show you, or can I show you your photos?
Yeah, go for it.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
So I'm actually going to step off camera while you're doing this so that we can...
Sounds good.
Get a nice view of this.
I don't have too many, but some that are pretty fun. And so the way that the event worked is that it's a role-play game, right? And so you go to UW-Madison into a PIX meeting where they're going to tell you all the rules about how to do it, how long they've been doing it for, the history of it, all of the like, hey, we're here to have fun. This is how you win or don't win and whatever, all that good stuff goes. And then they draw names, and then you get to pick your character when your name is called from this massive list of characters. That was the first time, actually, at the first PIX meeting that I went to, that I realized I didn't know as much about Lord of the Rings as I thought I did, because there is an extraordinarily huge list of characters that you'll never hear about unless you are familiar with the lore, and it's pretty cool the way that it works. So those were my times as Aragorn. So I was a team captain this was my 4th year having done it. This was the group of all of our friends when we went for... this is a huge crew from Whitewater, Wisconsin that went as the White Hand. We called ourselves the Whitewater Hand Orcs in order to have... Yeah, it was Tyler's birthday, Cowboy's birthday, and so we all went.
Can you zoom in on Cowboy? I gotta see this.
Let's see here. Yeah, so it's pretty... this kind of pixelated, but that was him back in the day. This would have been 9 years ago, I think.
Yeah, that was a long time.
So... that's him, and then there's me over on the end on this side with my. Like I even tried to keep the true to the form to the movie as best as we could. It was pretty fun. Here's our other roommate, King, and then lots of my friends from high school.
Where is he?
Huh?
You talking about King?
Cowboy's right here in the middle. King is over here on the
Wait,
end.
what? I did not know King Cho was there that year. Oh my
Yeah,
gosh,
really fun.
dude! Kang
He was like,
oh
he was
my
like, do
gosh.
I have to? Yeah, he's like, do I have to wear a costume? And I'm like, yeah, man, it's part of the experience. He's like, all right, I want to go all out then. And so him and I were up making our costumes. It was so fun. But you go and
Wait,
good guys start on one side.
I gotta point
I wish
out-
I had a map of these.
I gotta point out something real quick, Matt.
Yeah.
So Cowboy, you obviously would notice the homage to the Urukai of the movies, which is very highly simplified as to what was in the books. But if you see Cowboy, he is actually dressed as Saruman, and if you wonder why he looks like hippie Saruman. It's because he was dressed as Saruman the Many-Colored. The Many Colors. He, in the book, Saruman the White, in part of his corruption, he decides that the other colors are not needed, almost as if he embodies all the other colors. So it's a very subtle way of almost saying that no other of the White Council, which included the wizards, was needed. It's really interesting to get into some of the philosophy of what he was implying by calling himself Saruman the Many-Colored. So his robes looked similar to what his white robes were supposed to look like, but Gandalf noticed that they were shimmering, almost like fish's mail. They had a shine to them where they had a spectrum of multiple colors in them, and he said, I am Saruman the Many-Colored. So that's not something that made it into the movies, but that's why I appreciated when Tyler Cowboy decided to go as Saruman the Many Colors.
Yeah, it was pretty fun. It was very impressive too. And then so this is us standing on top of the hill, right? I guess that's another. Where's the one? Yeah. So this is the end of the game.
That is
this
actual
is the goal.
Mount Doom. Yeah.
Yeah. So you have to climb up this bluff while it's being defended by other players, right? And you have to sneak Frodo all the way up to the top, and then once you get there, you win if Frodo doesn't get stolen or killed. And it is actually possible for the at least they used to do this. The evil team would get a bonus win condition if they could steal Frodo without killing him, get Sauron the ring back, and then Sauron make it all the way back to the start. If Sauron could conquer the land, that's how you knew the good guys really, really lost the game. It was very fun.
Did that ever happen?
Not while I was playing. But that was a good time. So I'm glad you snatched that picture of me, because I was like, yeah, that's part of my Tolkien experience. That was how I started to get back into it, actually, is when I met other guys that were there and at UW-Madison who were like, yeah, man, there's so much more to this than the movies would have you believe.
And it's funny, you say...
Not to say that the movies aren't great, but...
You say UW-Madison. UW-Madison is actually where the first branch of the Tolkien Society in Wisconsin was founded.
Interesting. Mm-hmm. Why isn't it there anymore? Do you know?
All I know is the last time I was there, I forget if they call themselves Gondolin. I think they might. But I was there, and they went inactive because of COVID. So far, nothing is active on their Facebook page. They claim that they have some other ways of seeing if they can get active, but when I posted last on their page, they said that it didn't matter if their Facebook was active or not, that they were not currently active. So I don't know if they are tied. Last I checked, they're tied directly to UW-Madison, which means they may have had to raise up that support every few years as the graduates were getting older and leaving. So I don't know.
Sure.
I don't know much about them, but I do know that I believe it was directly tied to UW-Madison was the branch of the Tolkien Society there. And I knew there was a Milwaukee one. Again, have not seen... If you go to the Tolkien Society's website, actually, the Madison one is still very much listed as active, which means they're... And if I'm not mistaken, theirs is by far the oldest one in the state.
Okay,
they've been active. They started a long time ago, so we'll see. Post COVID, if they become active again, it's great because we can all work together.
Right, that'd be so cool.
So
that'd be super
cool. Let's talk about you were talking about how that was getting you more into What you already talked about your first encounter with Tolkien was The Hobbit on audiobook, which is awesome. What has been the influence or impact of Tolkien's work on your life throughout your life, and how is it changed or affected the things that you're interested in, like for hobbies, for work, all that kind of stuff?
For sure. Tolkien, so Lord of the Rings specifically, when I first saw the Hobbit animated movie, was like, wow, this is super fun. And that was, I mean, besides like your fairy tale movies from Disney and stuff, was my first like real introduction to the fantasy genre. And then my dad was like, hey, if you like this, you'll also definitely like the Chronicles of Narnia. And so I started to read fantasy genre stuff, and so when I was a kid growing up, those became my favorite kinds of games as well. I was introduced to Dungeons and Dragons, and Dungeons and Dragons has all of its roots based off of the fantasy genre. Tolkien and C.S. Lewis specifically were huge influences on Gary Gygax, and same for me as well. The connection to the characters in The Lord of the Rings, watching Frodo and Sam, was very, very fun for me. And when I was like, okay, I want to be a friend the way that Sam is a friend to Frodo. Like, I want to be that guy who never gives up on doing good things and never stops believing that there is good in the world.
Oh, hi!
This is my my middle daughter, Amelia. Millie, I almost named your little brother Sam because Sam's my favorite character from the novels.
Hi.
But Aubrey said that we couldn't name my son Samwise, so we chose something else instead. Are you getting ready to go to the park with Mama? You gonna go pick up Nora from school?
Not right now. I know it.
In a little bit. Okay. Sounds good. Yes, I have 3 kids. I have an older daughter, Nora, a younger daughter, Millie, and then I have a son, Josiah, who was just born a month and a half ago. So at the very beginning of July is when he was born. Yeah, it feels good. So yeah, you can sit with me for a little while.
Daddy.
Yes.
Can I have this now?
You're going to have to go ask Mama. If you want that, you definitely will. Right. See you later, kiddo.
This is the best. This is the best thing ever.
So I can't wait to, and one of my favorite things has been to introduce other people to Lord of the Rings as well. I wanted to make sure that, like, if I had friends, like, hey, you have to watch my favorite movie series with me.
Yes.
If we're going to be friends, right? So I cannot wait till Nora comes of age to, like, be able to watch those with me.
Oh my gosh.
And yeah, I got to pull out the VHS Hobbit animated movie pretty soon here from my parents' basement to make sure that she can watch that with me.
Oh man.
But
that, you know what? That one's
like,
good though. That one is good. We'll have to talk about it sometime because that one's good. The Lord of the Rings, there's some stuff there.
The old animated Lord of the Rings were fun.
But
we'll leave it there, I guess.
Even the Hobbit one is there's like moments where you're like, oh my gosh, this is amazing, because Matt was actually my first adaptation I ever saw of Tolkien.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I grew up. I first read The Hobbit in 3rd grade. We were supposed to do a book report on a mystery book, and I hated mystery books. I also didn't know how to use the Dewey Decimal System.
Sure.
And nobody was helping me in the school library. So somehow I got my hands on The Hobbit.
That's funny.
So
by accident? Like, it was an accident?
Yeah, no, I just randomly, I forget how, but it was literally like one of those pulled off the shelf and was reading it and going, oh, this is cool.
That's incredible.
So I ended up reading all the way through to where the dwarves got rescued by the eagles, and then heading into that part of the book, but I didn't get to I didn't finish it by the time the report was due. So that's as far as I got, which I don't remember how far into the book it is. I'll have to look it up and see but I think it might be about halfway. But so yeah, I made my mystery presentation was about how did the dwarves escape from the thing, and I had like a belt with claws hanging from it, and everyone was like,
"Oh, dude,
what is this? Like, what are you doing?" I think I actually got like a C+ on that one because I did the presentation well, but I didn't use a mystery book.
The teacher's like, that was great, Josh. But,
but I understood the assignment. So yeah,
that's incredible.
But then it
Oh my
was.
gosh.
I didn't actually. Then it was really funny. Was that same year for the spring?
Mm-hmm.
In the spring, there was a girl in. I think she was either a junior or a senior. That we had a private school that combined K through 12 for their Christmas and spring programs.
Sure.
And they would have like 1,000 kids just up there on the stage singing, songs and stuff like that because, it's Christian education. We got to prove our validity. But I was in the Christmas skit for the elementary. They had this junior and high school girl be my guardian angel. And so we did a lot of practices for that skit. And so I got to know her pretty well. I ended up having a massive crush on her. So that spring, the stage where the high schoolers would do their play every year was actually at the elementary campus. So what they do is one of their dress rehearsals would be for the elementary schoolers, if the play was appropriate.
Sure, that makes sense.
And that year, I heard she was in it, and so she ran by the door. We're all praying for something. I forget what we were doing, but somebody told her which classroom I was in, and she ran by the door in costume and waved at me, and I was like, ah! You know what I mean? She, when she did that, her costume was head to toe green fur and green camo makeup because she was playing Gollum and the play was The Hobbit.
No way.
Yes.
That's amazing.
I'm dead serious.
That's hilarious.
So yeah, that was that was my first encounter with it, was reading The Hobbit, doing a mystery production a mystery presentation about it, and then watching a high schooler I had a crush on playing Gollum. She pretty much looked like Jim Carrey's Grinch. It probably was a Jim Carrey Grinch costume.
Sure, yeah, that's
actually
hilarious.
no. That movie would not have come out yet, so I don't know. Because in third grade,
still,
third grade I would have been that would have been 1995. So that movie was not out yet.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I'm old.
No. you're not. Okay, yeah.
Anyway,
if you were in third grade in 1995, I was born in 1995. So I don't want to make you super old, but that's where I'm at.
Third grade's not that old though. Third grade's 9 or 10. That's not that bad.
Yeah.
If I was in 9/11, when my young adults that I teach now. So I have a young adult group that meets in my house every other week, and I'll do that. I'll be
so cool.
Oh man, I was a freshman in high school at 9/11, and they're like, I was born 3 years later.
Yeah,
and I was just
no,
you're
so old.
Anyway, so yeah, what do you have? Do you want to? Are you talking about stuff during your life that you got into? Do you want to show pictures of that, or do you want to keep talking that?
I don't really have too many other things to show, minus that it was Lord of the Rings that inspired me to start into the fantasy genre. So reading books, and then if there were games, me and my brothers played tons of video games, and so fantasy or adventure games were always my favorite.
You said you played the Lord of the Rings video games?
I have. A couple of them, at least, when I was younger. I remember playing those when I was a kid, but then when I was getting into middle school, high school, my family was super into World of Warcraft, and then we put World of Warcraft away, and my dad actually picked up Lord of the Rings online. Oh, yeah, classics, man. Those are so good.
The classics.
Yep.
Yeah, I played them on PS2. That's what I played them on.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yep, that's where I would have had it the first time as well. Is on the PlayStation.
Somehow a separate content somebody got the license before Warner Brothers could jump on it, and they made a bizarre Fellowship of the Ring video game.
Okay,
yeah,
and
that was right when the movies came out, and so that's why there's only the Two Towers in the Return of the King. Because they grabbed the license super quick, and then they made the Two Towers, which went back and did a bunch of battles from
So played those, and then started getting into Lord of the Rings online. I played Lord of the Rings online for about a year and a half when I was in high school, and I've actually been thinking about getting back into it because apparently the updates they've made in the past year have made the game super awesome.
Oh,
so
massive updates. Well, they just had their, if I'm not mistaken, you're talking about Lotro?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so Lotro just had their 16th anniversary.
That's so cool.
It's still running, and so yeah, they actually have another update still coming out. But they've continued to expand. So yeah, you were talking earlier about how Ring War had this list of characters that you wouldn't know if you knew the lore. Yeah, Lotro is insane. Like, if you want to talk about,
that's so cool.
You want to talk about a book accurate adaptation, Lotro has every character ever mentioned in the Lord of the Rings and the appendices, full-blown storylines. They've mapped out, because one of the things that Tolkien's known for is if you're reading through the Lord of the Rings or the Hobbit, he will explicitly describe the landscape that they are moving through.
Sure.
It's down to the types of trees, the types of plants and animals, the smells, the sights, the topography, how far away they can see away from them, everything. And so when they made Lotro, they're like, here we go. We got all the stuff. And they built it the most accurate they possibly could.
That's so impressive.
Which is, yeah, it's beautiful. So yeah, when you jump in Lotro, all of a sudden you'll just be like, wait a minute, I saw a scene from the last battle, the battle of the, oh my gosh, why am I spacing right now? Pelennor Fields in front of Minas Tirith.
Okay.
And the Witch King shows up, and he looks like he's supposed to look in the book. His hood is thrown back. There is no head. There's just glowing eyes and a crown floating on nothing.
Aha.
And he's looking at Éowyn, and the lines, the dialogue between the two of them was like line for line from the book.
Oh, that's so impressive.
It was great. It was great to watch.
So how do they, so let's talk about, I guess, licenses a little bit, because some of the things that I've gotten into sort of muddle the lore of Lord of the Rings over the years, right? Like, I didn't want to really have much to do with what Amazon did. I watched the first episode and decided it wasn't for me, but I really like Lord of the Rings Online, but I also know there are extra adaptations like Shadow of Mordor, for example, like those types of things. There's been TV series, back and forth. Who has rights to do what with what?
I have to look that up again and remember the names of the companies themselves. But because for some reason it escapes my mind right now. But basically, I think I'll just do a stream where I just talk about just that, because it has a huge impact on how you look at the things that are adapted from Tolkien. So basically, the Tolkien Society, safeguards Tolkien's work, but also promotes it and does all that. But the Tolkien estate are the ones that actually own his work.
Sure.
But there are also curators of some of the physical pieces of it. So you have Oxford and the Bodleian Library, you have Marquette, and you have a tiny number of smaller independent sources that have some of his work. But for the most part, it's the Tolkien estate itself, the Bodleian Library. Because if you think about it, the Tolkien estate, there's his family right there. Right. But if they're sitting there holding this stuff in boxes in an office somewhere, and the roof starts leaking at whatever house they're keeping it at, the Oxford libraries literally are used to preserving manuscripts from the Middle Ages.
Right.
So to be honest, it doesn't actually matter in that sense of the physical work who owns it, as long as they're in a good relationship with each other, because what they needed was someone to curate his work to make sure it didn't degrade over time. So a lot of his stuff is housed at Oxford in the Bodleian Libraries, because they know how to curate it, to organize it, to translate it, very, very much so, because a lot of this stuff was never meant to see the light of day. Tolkien was not a verbal processor.
Sure.
So, I think by talking. Tolkien literally thought by writing and reading.
Interesting.
So a good number of his stuff needs to be interpreted because it got so rushed, and especially after he switched to ballpoint pen, you can't actually read it very easily at all, and even some of the points where Tolkien himself couldn't read it.
Right.
So like you have to have
scribbling down journals.
Experts like Carl Hofstetter who put together entire systems to be able to translate this handwriting. So all that stuff needs to be done by curators. So a lot of that is been curated by the Oxford and the Bodleian Library at Oxford, and then Marquette obtained some of that through a third party. I forget how exactly it happened. I need to look it up. It's really interesting though, but it has to do with the fact I believe that Marquette is a Catholic university.
Sure, that makes sense.
Anyway, if you're wanting to talk about rights, the rights to anything at all, are all retained by the Tolkien estate, and they have only given out the rights to two things, and that's it.
Interesting.
Just two things: The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. That's
okay.
it. There is no. The only reason why you see things that look like they imply stuff from the second and first age is because they're pulling snippets from the appendices at the end of The Lord of the Rings.
Got it.
That's it. The Silmarillion, the rest of the Legendarium, all of that, the rights to those works to be adapted into anything at all has expressly been withheld, and if, from what I have read of the work of Christopher Tolkien, it may be explicitly withheld forever.
Sure, makes sense.
Because he was not a fan of the movies.
Aha.
Yeah.
Aha.
It's interesting. We'll get into that sometime too, about the fact of I don't know that Christopher Tolkien and J.R.R. Tolkien would have felt the same way as each other about Tolkien's work in his adaptation. But I think he was an incredibly amazing man. He dedicated his life to preserving his father's work, and I don't think there's anything wrong with how seriously he took it.
Sure.
But I do think he was not in the mode of creation. He was in the mode of preservation.
Yeah,
exactly.
You got to keep the integrity of the work.
Exactly. So like Tolkien could have written any number of letters, which he did. He wrote hundreds of letters explaining different things. You know, somebody'd send him an artwork piece that wasn't correct or didn't look like what he would have thought. He would simply write them a letter and say, "Thank you. I think these are beautiful. I think that's nice, but that's not quite right." And he'd just send it back to him. And it didn't really lose any sleep over it. You know what I mean? But
yeah, that makes sense.
After he was gone, it's this idea of it must be preserved, it must be safeguarded, and I think a lot of that stuff bothered Christopher quite a lot.
That makes sense.
But anyway, right now there are movie and television rights to The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. If I'm not mistaken, because I don't know if they are considered joint, but I do know if you buy the rights to The Lord of the Rings, it's the rights to the 3 Lord of the Rings books and the appendices.
Okay.
But most people tend to buy the rights to The Hobbit as well, just so that they can use the information from The Hobbit that's explicitly stated in The Hobbit without breaking any rules.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So currently, Warner Brothers still has the rights to that. So they can still make things like video games and stuff like that. And they have reached a new cooperative agreement with the Tolkien Society, actually. With the Tolkien Estate. There is another group, I believe it's called Embracer, that owns all of the merchandising and video game and board game and tabletop game and card game and all of those rights.
Okay.
They own the licenses for those. And so if I'm not mistaken, so Embracer Group is working with Warner Brothers and the Tolkien Estate right now. They've signed a cooperative agreement because what's happening is they're trying to consolidate a lot of the stuff that's happening. So if you want to, for example, create an RPG of any kind, like a tabletop RPG, and you're an independent game creator, you don't have to talk to the Tolkien estate. You can talk to Embracer. And just say, hey, I would like to obtain a license to make this RPG about the Third Age of Middle-earth in this part of the thing. And then you work with them to fulfill their requirements of you. But if I'm not mistaken, Embracer makes a lot of those decisions because Embracer has not purchased all of those perpetually from the Tolkien estate. It's more like they are acting on behalf of the Tolkien estate.
Got it.
So you work with Embracer on making whatever content that you do, but the reality is because Embracer and the estate and Warner Brothers have all signed these agreements with each other and they're openly working with each other, there is no, oh, that's not good, that's terrible, and Tolkien would have hated that. His estate just approved it.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, as much as people don't like what Amazon did, Wizards of the Coast makes D&D and Magic the Gathering, if I'm not mistaken. They own both, right?
Yep.
They just released Magic. If you don't like the Magic, it's like, that's not Amazon, that's Embracer Group, and the Tolkien estate has given Embracer Group the rights to do that license with individual makers. So
sure.
yeah. So basically what happened... Yeah.
I'm going to go get a bunch of the Lord of the Rings Magic card sets. I just started getting into Magic last year, and my son was born in July, and so I wasn't allowed to spend too much money going up into June and July when the cards were released, and so, but I really like the art that's on a lot of those cards.
They're beautiful.
I know you and I talked a little bit about the interpretation that was taken of the artwork for those cards caused a whole bunch of crazy controversy, but like it didn't need to because they're super cool regardless. Yes. I think that's so fun.
Well, and again, you could talk about I'm sure I'll do one episode where I get into the Amazon stuff just to talk about it, but with Magic, it's not the same way. I've looked at hundreds of those cards. My buddy Jordan we're going to do a stream where we play Magic the Gathering with the Lord of the Rings cards. We're going to do a bunch of streams just for that as well. Yes. We're trying to get local gaming meetups at our local gaming store right here in Racine called The Sanctum. They have an incredible community there of gamers, so we're going to try and do a stream either there or, something like that. But if you look at their cards, they have many beautiful characters on there, and no two depictions of them artwork-wise are the same. Right. So it's not like you're saying, oh my gosh, they made so-and-so look like this. No, they made so-and-so look like 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 different ways.
Right.
Lots
of different things.
Exactly. So you may pick up cards of just many different ways of looking at the characters. And to be honest, I enjoy that. I think that's awesome. Because it's not saying this is what this character definitively looked like. It's saying, here's an interpretation of if this character looked like this. I don't think. Sure. I think it's beautiful, and the artwork, like you said, the artwork is magnificent.
Super fun.
And I mean, everybody in the Tolkien community loves art.
Put some of the cards into my commander deck.
Right,
dude. Let me know when you're doing that because that's going to be a blast. I can't wait to watch you play.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. So, back to what are you currently up to that is kind of dovetails with Tolkien?
So right now, over the past, guess since I was like 12, really, I have been playing lots of Dungeons and Dragons, and like you said at the very beginning, you said you've very much appreciated my Dungeons and Dragons sessions. Josh has played with me in multiple campaigns when we were in school and post and over the internet over the years, and it has been fun. And I take lots of my adventure inspiration from what I have participated in Lord of the Rings, whether that's from the old video games or from the books or from the movies. I love the way that the characters in the books filled an archetype of what man is like, and I try to elicit those same emotions whenever I have players at my table. And so people will be like, they will notice like, oh, hey, this is a loyalty character. Like, I recognize that. Or this is a burdened character. Or this is a character. I really like soft magic systems as well. And so Tolkien's approach to magic is very fun. It lets me as the DM be really creative. And when I want to say, hey, this magic thing happens, and they say, why? I say, because. And so that's always been really fun. And so that's been fantastic. But, I hear my baby crying. I'm going to pass it to you in a couple seconds here and make sure that my wife's good.
All
but
right.
I will, so Dungeons & Dragons has been a huge, huge thing. My father and I have started to publish the adventures that we've written. So I am a partner of Amplus Ordo Games right now, where we are beginning to publish Dungeons & Dragons adventure. I'll talk about that in just a moment here. I'll let Josh take it from there for a second.
Alrighty. So, yeah, let's see here. I want to pull up some pictures of Pelarga. Who's up in here right now? Let's see. Let's see what I got here. I did want to talk real quick. In addition to the Facebook page, we also have the Discord. But actually, I'm going to do something real quick. Let's see if I can do this without it causing some sort of a feedback loop. I'm going to see if I can pull up my Twitch page itself, even though we are live streaming right now. It's probably going to get mad at me, but I don't care. I'm going to mute myself.
Okay, I'm back.
Oh, you
Dad
back?
life.
I
am back.
Watch out. Come on, mute. Mute.
Can you hear me now?
There we go.
Yay.
Yes, I can. Yeah, I was actually going to show them something here, Matt, real quick. So why don't I go ahead and still do that, and then we'll get back to your stuff. I wanted to show what we've got going on the Twitch page, because I did not have a chance to show you this either. So this is going to be cool to see. So on the Twitch page, I've decided it's perfect place to do it because Discord just feels so much like a chat room to me.
Yes.
I like it, but I think this is some ways of permanently doing that. So if you can still see my screen,
yep.
If you go to the Pelargear Podcast's Twitch page, we're going to have something really cool. We will have resources and links for you that will continuously be growing. One of the biggest things that we were talking about is that it's hard to find Tolkien content that is, shall we say, verifiable. Because there's so many layers to his work. There are the published books, but then there are what he said about the published books. Then there are what his son said about the published books. And then there are what scholars have been able to figure out from the many manuscripts. So even the lore masters that you'll find on the content creators on YouTube, they will come out with something and you'll look at it and then you'll realize later when you've talked to somebody, be like, that's not right at all.
Interesting.
Like, that's just not right at all. I recently had the amazing experience where I actually got to meet a Tolkien scholar of an extremely high caliber completely by mistake. And he dropped in just kept dropping bombs like every 5 seconds. By the way, along with rejection of gatekeeping and fan culture, I am not someone who does name dropping. I'm just not going to do it. So I don't need to look any cooler, and I am not cooler by my proximity to people who I think are cool.
Yeah.
And again, without the fan culture, it's just really, really cool that I got to meet someone who knows that much about Tolkien, who knows the authors who've contributed to his work, who edits some of the work that actually comes out. So when you talk to people like that, you very, very, really quickly realize that it's very hard because people will read some of Tolkien's work and think they understand all that there is to know. And then they'll realize that if they'd have just kept reading more of his books and understanding more of his stuff, that it completely would have changed their outlook on any number of things. So what's hard is it's hard to come up with stuff. Like there are authors that are better than others. The problem is the authors that are the best, nobody knows about. And the ones that are the worst, you can find on any bookshelf in any Barnes & Noble, anywhere you want to go.
Sure.
If you Google Tolkien, any number of topics about him, you'll always get the worst author of them all in like the top of the list.
Sure, forums that repost what's been widely available rather than what's actually good.
So we're going to be doing some sharing of resources by putting in things that I have vetted, that I can tell you exactly what they are and whether or not they're good. And again, we are not a content creator, but I can show you the people who are, and I'm very happy to do so because that's not a thing that I'm trying to build in a brand. So if you go on our page, you'll see links. So first, I am going to do every episode that I add a new one, I will talk about it first.
Cool.
So,
that's awesome.
So for today, I've got just 3 or 4. So first of all, we have Nerd of the Rings. What I've put down there is that this is by far the most professional quality and most engaging Tolkien content creator of his kind on YouTube. Nerd of the Rings actually uses D&D style mapping tokens. He will take a character's painting and leave it always for any video he makes of that character. That painting or drawing will remain his token always. And he will use those tokens to show you where on the maps to help viewers to remember and to keep straight all of the many characters and their names and who they are and their journeys in Tolkien's Legendarium. Now, in Lord of the Rings, this is very interesting. In the Silmarillion, it is vital. It made all the difference for me. So he also is now gone, in the last 2 years, he's gone from 90-something thousand subscribers to almost... I
see here he has 969,000.
So he's almost at 1 million subscribers now. So the last 2 years, he has skyrocketed. So now he's doing things where he's being featured at Gen Con, and he is being able to interview people. And so, yes, it's very pop culture. Yes, I think depending on what your tastes are, you might be super into his stuff, or you might think that it's a little bit too pop culture, a little bit too fan servicey for your taste. But the cool thing is, his popularity gives him access to the things that we would like to see. So he now features interviews with the cast and production crews of the movies and TV shows and even the games. You get to see him playing card games with the creators of the card games. You get to see him interviewing Billy and Dom, who played Merry and Pippin in the movies, and he also did an extensive interview with John Rhys-Davies, who played Gimli in the movies. He also did with the Richard Taylor, the iconic Sir Richard Taylor, the director of the Weta Workshop in New Zealand. Again, because of his access, because of his popularity, he's able to bring interviews with people that we do want to see, especially if you happen to be someone who enjoys the movies. So, one thing I will say, his only flaw is that his knowledge does seem to occasionally fall short of the scholarly level. He will show you all the books that you will ever need to read to get to an incredible level of knowledge on Tolkien and learn all the things that you want to learn. But occasionally he doesn't know that what he has read, whether or not it is valid or not, or considered an absolute true interpretation of what Tolkien would have kept in the final version. So, like, for example, there's sticky points. Galadriel and Celeborn's origin story is very highly debated because it is the most it has the most contradictions of anything Tolkien had to rewrite after Lord of the Rings. So some of that stuff, you need to dig a little bit deeper than just his videos. He did do a video on the secret origins of the Red Book of Westmarch, where he basically presented the theory that I mentioned before, that someone brought the works of that were contained in the Silmarillion and the Lord of the Rings from Tol Eressëa, where they visited the elves and gave them, the elf wine story. Yeah, that's an early origin story that Tolkien abandoned. It is. But you wouldn't necessarily know that depending on how much of his books you've read and actually get into. No, that is not the final explanation. And it's hard because new books are being published all the time in the last few years, and they're changing what we know about that stuff. So it's not his fault, but I will say occasionally it does. There's some cracks in the thing, but honestly, I'd say more than 90% of his content is beyond spot on. It's amazing. So you watch any 20 of his videos on the first stage, you will be able to get through the Silmarillion in one try.
Wow, that's so cool.
There's only one part of the Silmarillion that's actually hard to read, and it's where they tell you who is who and what kingdoms they rule. If you can get through that chapter, the rest of the Silmarillion is fine. And he will make sure that you know who those people are, because the problem is all their names sound the same. So moving on, the Broken Sword and Men of the West are the other two channels in what are known as a fellowship. Now, to be fair, since Nerd of the Rings Ascension, I don't know, they don't necessarily compete with each other or do anything but I don't know how much collaboration they do now that he doesn't need to.
Right, yeah.
But I will say on the last Hobbit Day, they did all three of them together make videos where they collabed on which content they were going to focus on and released them all on the same day.
Okay,
so
cool.
that was cool. So if I'm not mistaken, and from what I've seen of their videos, there is zero enmity or competition between them. They're all doing their own thing. They're all quite enjoying it. And to be honest, all three of them are still decently monetized when it comes, I believe Broken Sword has a team of people. So Broken Sword is my second favorite YouTube Tolkien source. The production quality continues to grow on their videos. They're getting better. And the links, this is big, because Nerd of the Rings does this as well. But the links to all of their content sources are insanely extensive. Every piece of music, every piece of artwork, every piece of information that they pulled from a book, all in their description. So you can hunt down and learn where to look for this information for yourself. Which
They're
is
good
awesome.
at citing their sources. That's exciting.
So this helps enthusiasts track down anything from art to music to lore. And unlike Men of the West, this channel is built by a team of enthusiasts, which in my opinion makes their content a bit more extensive and a little bit more reliable.
That's cool.
Men of the West, beautifully done. The guy actually cares about this stuff. He is a YouTuber who is clearly dedicated to explaining and exploring the lore of Middle-earth. And again, along with Nerd of the Rings and Broken Sword, they form a fellowship of Tolkien channels. The professional quality of his videos is not insanely high, but his knowledge of the books seems to be. And if you get into a phase of hyperfixation like me, I've crazy ADHD, and you just want the stuffs, these guys are great. But to be honest, if you're just getting into it, Nerd of the Rings is going to probably be your best thing to start with, especially because of how many videos he's got now. He's got a lot of videos. And then the last thing is Clamavi de Profundis. This is an incredible team of composers, musicians, and vocalists known for putting the beloved poems and songs of Tolkien to music. So he actually, if I'm not mistaken, did a Dragonborn interpretation as well from that song from Skyrim. So yeah, he's an amazing guy, and the countdown music that I used for you guys is actually
Was that him?
That was him.
Them?
Yes. So that was a
Super
song.
cool.
I'm throwing you up on the screen. So the countdown music I used was actually his one of his latest releases actually, where he did the coronation song of Aragorn. So I will talk more about that.
So cool.
I'll talk more about that in a later episode. So yeah, Clamavi de Profundis you can find him on Spotify and YouTube. Now all of those pictures and links I just showed you, if you click on them, they will take you where you can find them. So I have an awesome playlist myself of some Lord of the Rings music that I love. A lot of it is by that guy. He does things like the Song of Durin. He does songs from the movies where they would only do one verse. He will re-perform it and then continue the other verses.
Yeah,
so like
it. That's super cool.
especially the Hobbit one, so Far Over the Misty Mountains Cold, he took the same tune and simply continued by doing the rest of the verses.
Durin's song, that's so sick.
Yeah, Durin's
so cool.
Durin's song is probably my favorite. I will probably post stuff for you guys to see. So, anyway, Mr. Matt, what were you talking about before you had to take off and come back?
I appreciate you letting me dip. I was just talking about how, as far as Lord of the Rings sort of bleeding over into everything else that we enjoy, the things that I like to do. It was Lord of the Rings that inspired my love of fantasy, and then because most RPGs are also fantasy, just tons and tons of time in RPGs. And you had said, like, what's your hobby right now? Right now, I'm bouncing back and forth between all kinds of things. But over this previous school year, I led a Dungeons and Dragons club where my father and I were producing content, and now my dad has begun to publish that content. I publish stuff alongside of him.
All right, should I pull up your stream so we can talk? Go for it. Talk to me about this because this is whether he won't say it, guys, but this is amazing. Because I've seen the library of content that this man pulls from. I really, really, really want to see this stuff. I'm really excited to see this stuff. Let's check it out.
You'll be super familiar, Josh, actually, with this one, because this is one of the adventures that you ran with me. So if anybody of your listeners out there are familiar with Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, I played the first edition I ever played was 4th edition, and then I went back to 3.5 with some friends, and then into 5th edition when it came out in the early 20-teens. And so what I have been doing is publishing adventures that are very easy for new players specifically to pick up. And I think that was one of the things about like actual Tolkien that was kind of like intimidating or scary is people are like, well, if you like the books, or if you like the movies, then you'll like the other stuff. But then when you try to get into the other stuff, it's like really hard to do unless you're ready for it. I know that was kind of me, but I love passing on these types of things specifically to younger people. Josh mentioned earlier, I do children's ministry. And so I have a club where I have kids and teenagers that come learn how to play games and then do this as well, and I walk through it with them. So I publish all of my adventures in a way that will evoke an emotion from you that's more focused on the story, getting to know the NPCs, getting to feel the role of the hero while specifically undertaking everything that would make classic Dungeons & Dragons what feels good about it, whether you're slaying the monsters or whether you're finding the treasure or whether you're saving whoever needs to be saved. Josh, this is an example of the adventure that I actually ran your group through when you had to get the slaves from the werebore. And so this is the way I make mine. Yes, this is the way I make mine look. My dad is much more professional. And what he is posting, this is his Christmas adventure that got super, super popular. His is formatted the exact same way that you would find a 5th edition.
I was going to say that's a straight up 5th edition book. You've got your acts, you've got your to-do list. Look at that. Pre-game cutscenes. Oh my gosh.
This is the way he does it. And my father is very, very good at using the tools out there for map making to make maps.
Look at that. That's good.
This is the type of stuff. And he wanted to get into all of this because of Lord of the Rings as well. So it's kind of like generational for my family to be able to go through this. The way that, especially like over here, the style of medieval map that he likes to do, he has tons more, and I didn't have time to go grab those or pull them up. If you want to see what he's got, you can go to the Patreon page, which is Amplus Ordo Games on Patreon, and you can see both my stuff and his stuff. And that's been pretty cool. But the way that I like to build my adventures, I want it to feel like adventure, not just like to-do list or checklist or like mini quests and stuff. That's one of the reasons I think I want to start getting back into Lord of the Rings online, is because people have said that as the game has expanded, it really does immerse you very well, very differently than a different MMO would be. Josh, I know you haven't always been the biggest MMO guy, but I love MMOs. I was a huge WoW fan, Elder Scrolls Online fan. I tried Neverwinter. I think
it's a class like upbringing thing where I was raised on console, and generally speaking, MMOs are classically more of a PC gamer thing. And the reality is, not only did I never have a PC that could have handled that growing up. So I didn't grow up just naturally knowing, like, I know a lot of people who they don't really think very highly of their technical skills, but they just know how they know how to put together a basic gaming PC, or they have it in their budgets that they know how to, that they at least buy one and get it all set up. I never got into PC gaming. So I've gotten into basically the console, more popular among console versions of that. Like, so I'm very big into Minecraft, Skyrim. Although Minecraft is also a huge PC game as well. But I grew up playing on Bedrock. But so I would play things like Skyrim. Now I did have a lot of buddies growing up where they'd play things like not Shadow of Mordor. Was it War of the Ring? Dungeon Siege,
War for Middle, Battle for Middle Earth.
Yeah,
that was good.
World of Warcraft, that kind of stuff.
Good.
So I've seen a lot of it, but I've never had a computer that could handle playing. So I never really got into that stuff.
Sure.
But the concept is amazing. I've just never was just never something I got into. Maybe someday.
Someday. Speaking of someday things I would love to try with you, this is something that you have shown me a while ago.
Yes.
There were publishers that had access to the 5th edition Adventures in Middle-earth. These books are really, really cool. And you had mentioned that they are no longer in print.
Okay.
Why is that? What happened?
So here's the interesting thing. And again, this all has to do with how the licensing works. So, for example, we'll do an entire episode about it. But, by the way, I don't know if it's distracting, but I threw on the music I was supposed to be playing this whole time. So, the game makers who want to make this kind of stuff, they would have to go through the license, the person who owns the actual license, and they would get a temporary license to make it. Now, are you familiar, Matt? Are you familiar with what happened to D&D when it released its first edition?
All I know is that the Tolkien estate was not very happy with the way that they used monsters directly from Lord of the Rings.
Yep.
So, for example, Orc, right? That was Tolkien's invention. It was not a generic mythology monster.
Trying to see if I can get some better lighting for the TV. Hey!
So, I do remember that, and sometimes it was kind of funny too when I was playing in younger games, because I would just my imagination would go faster than I could read the rule books. I would throw in monsters from like Lord of the Rings and treat the monsters that way, and other friends that were more familiar with Dungeons and Dragons but less familiar with Lord of the Rings were like, "That's not how goblins do things." And I'm like, haven't you ever seen Lord of the Rings? Like, that's not how orcs did things.
So
and I'm like, well, not too bad.
So one of the interesting things is, when D&D First Edition came out, what happened was they did not have... You know what? I'm getting some washout on your screen here. Let me see if I can change some of the lighting settings real quick and see if I can see it better. Let's see if we
These books are pretty cool. I would love to go through these with you sometime.
Hey! Cinema! There we... Oh, see? I'm going to have to switch, I think, when we do our podcast, if anybody's watching. I think I'm going to have to switch to using my front-facing camera, because what's happening is, with me sitting in between the TV and the thing, as soon as I step away, it should refocus.
It's auto-focusing,
See, look at that. See that? So now it's focusing on the TV, and you can see a little bit better. But again, the camera continues to refocus. So we're going to have to mess around with the lighting and get some better stuff so you guys can see all this, because it's gorgeous. So if I'm not mistaken, it was Orc. Also the fact that Tolkien actually changed the spelling of English words.
Sure.
So before he finished publishing, elf and elves was kind of considered appropriate. So elf was ELF and elves was ELVES.
Okay.
But dwarf was dwarf and dwarfs.
Dwarfs with an F?
Dwarfs with an F. And so in his mind, he was looking at how language evolved, and you have someone who literally worked at Oxford, as in the Oxford Dictionary, and someone who studied how English evolved in the first place, a philologist. And so he pretty much argued with the publisher and basically said, no, it makes more sense for dwarves plural to be dwarves with a V. And
here we go. Yeah.
After that, it became a thing. So yeah. Well, they can't see it on the stream, unfortunately, but yeah, elves of Mirkwood and dwarves with a V. You'll see right there in the thing. So
yeah.
So what's really funny is that is eventually what became considered the English spelling, the correct spelling of dwarves plural. Period.
Interesting.
So when the Tolkien,
because Tolkien decided to do it.
Yes, and so now it is that's the accepted spelling. Period. So for that reason, dwarves and elves in D&D First Edition were not as big of an issue because they were like, but now it's changed for everybody. But what was an issue were hobbits, the Balrog, and Ents.
Oh,
because
sure.
Tolkien invented the word hobbit, he invented the word Balrog, and he invented Ents. The inspiration that led to some of those characters' creations were drawn from many sources, but the words themselves and their character creations were too close to the published work of The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, and so the Tolkien estate was basically like, you're gonna have to change them. So Ents, you can tell me what did Ents, Balrogs, and Hobbits change to?
So they got changed from Ent to Treant, and so it was a Treant is the just the one word. Hobbits became halflings officially, and then they ended up splitting the classification of demon into both demon and devil. The Balrog became a demon that they renamed to Baelor. So if you're a Dungeons and Dragons fan and you're like, hey, that looks awfully similar to the Balrog, well, that's exactly why. So he's got the whip in one hand and the huge weapon in the other, massive wings and horns and stuff, and that was based off of the Balrog. That's really curious. That's interesting.
So yeah, and the same thing with hobbits. They had to change hobbits to what, you said?
Halflings. They became halflings after that. So always halflings.
So you may be able to see or not in the stream, and we'll make sure that we're ready for that when you get there. But in the stream, in what he's showing, in this version, this is official D&D 5e Lord of the Rings, which means the Balrog can be called a Balrog. The elves and dwarves are elves and dwarves, and they have reset a lot of their stats and their descriptions. You will find some similarities in there to first edition D&D. Obviously,
that's super cool.
They've learned a lot since then about how they want to run their game. So it's not like they just went back and copy and pasted. But there's some similarities because now you can actually have a Balrog in D&D. You can actually, so the Beornings is the page you're on now. The Beornings are the descendants of Beor from The Hobbit. That is something that is straight from the Lord of the Rings books. And you can literally, have those happen. So here's what happened. Independent makers of games, they got together and they had a D&D 5e version of Lord of the Rings. But their license they were made by a different company, and their license was through the original license holder. As this cooperative agreement between Warner Brothers, the Tolkien estate, and Embracer Group kind of coalesced, they basically had to kind of start consolidating a little bit more. So the official word from the maker of this version of D&D was that they no longer desired to work with the people who owned the license, and they decided to pull out. What I'm thinking happened is they basically were trying to consolidate and more or less made it impossible for them to operate so that they could pull the license back and reset everything. That's unfortunate for the people who enjoyed Adventures in Middle-earth because The Mines of Moria was just about to be released. And this was 2021, I think. It was very recently all this went down. So that was very upsetting for people because they were like, you gotta be kidding me. we finally had a 5e official version of D&D, something that people have waited since D&D's inception to be able to do,
Right.
because of how much D&D is so closely related to Tolkien. And now it wasn't official anymore. The only reason we have these is because these are the old PDFs from those handbooks. So it's not illegal to play or illegal to have remnants of, but it's not considered official D&D anymore. It's considered a homebrew or a previous version. So
Yeah,
of course you cannot, since we are not monetizing or not looking to brand or anything like that, there's no harm in us having this or showing this to anybody. But if you were trying to do any sort of monetization of anything or content creation through D&D or anything like that, you would not be able to use this now unofficial version of D&D. So what's interesting though is since then, they had another RPG that was meant to be very, very strict to the books. It was called The One Ring. And that is loosely based on D&D 5e, but they have homebrewed it to the point where it's a separate game entirely. That is beautifully done. The mechanics of it are incredibly good and very, very accurate, but to the point where it's just completely boring. The One Ring. One of your first adventures that they give you in The One Ring is trying to steal crops from Farmer Maggot.
That's hilarious.
And it's like
Oh my God.
it's fun, but I'd be more likely to do that if I knew I was on my way to Moria, you know, or something like that. So I'm waiting to see if The One Ring releases anything that is, further along the line. But in the meantime, it was just announced that the 5e version of D&D has been re-released. And if I'm not mistaken, it looks almost identical to the Adventures in Middle-earth. They've simply relaunched it, and it is official once again that 5e is... So this is Adventures in Middle-earth, but I believe the new one... Let's see... I keep getting advertisements.
I'll have to look into it.
Lord of the Rings, D&D. Let's see if I can find... the images of it and the advertisements of it are shooting all over the internet right now. I keep getting ads for it. There it is. So now it is actually called... it is actually called The Lord of the Rings Role-Playing, and it is indeed 5e itself. So I can...
that's so cool.
So we will have to look at it because it'd be really cool to see how that works. Come on.
Yes.
I'm clicking on it. So yeah, actually, let's see. Will it let
More
me?
master screen and Rivendell Compendium. That's so cool. Here, I'll stop streaming so you can show it.
Yeah. So if you... there we go.
Go do an adventure as part of the podcast. That'd be so fun.
Oh my gosh, I think that'd be amazing. Here we are. Let us... I'm going to click off of this so we just see your face.
Free League Publishing looks like. They're using the 5th edition rule set in order to publish the content, which is really cool.
Yes, I believe so. There we go. So yeah, if you look on the screen, so that is the new logo for the Lord of the Rings role-playing. So, yeah, and of course the top search results include Magic the Gathering because it's all Wizards of the Coast. So yep, it's based on the works of 5th edition role-playing in the world of Lord of the Rings, which is super cool. I gotta click back on you now. I lost you. So yeah, basically anybody who was making stuff before is more or less being able to do it again. But some of them are being done by different makers, and also. So what's interesting now is that Embracer Group, originally what I was thinking they were going to do was consolidate and basically only allow either independent or only allow Warner Brothers to make content. So, like, to try
Okay.
to try and avoid what happened with the Fellowship of the Ring video game, I thought that that's what they were trying to do, to the point where I figured they were just going to try and cut Amazon out of all of the merchandising abilities. But that does not appear to have happened. It would seem that Amazon is still able to make what they want. But what's interesting is we've seen zero attempt by Amazon to make anything non-digital.
Right.
So Amazon seems to be trying to make an MMO. They say they're trying to make an MMO at Amazon.
Yep.
But they have not yet. But there is no digital. So what you haven't seen is what I think one of the reasons why the Embracer Group, Warner Brothers, and Tolkien Estate did that triple agreement is that the estate has some issues with how things have been handled in the past.
I'm not surprised.
When Warner Brothers made their movies, what was really interesting was that it was kind of like Star Wars. People just did not understand how insane this was going to be. So by the time the third movie was released and this thing was becoming this global phenomenon, and Return of the King was nominated for 11 Oscars and won all of them.
Right.
It became
that's like an incredible.
It became triple tied with Ben-Hur and Titanic for the most Oscar awarded film of all time. So when that happened, all of a sudden the merchandising went crazy, and so Warner Brothers just started flooding the market with Lord of the Rings products, and I think the Tolkien Estate was watching very carefully to try and figure out how involved should they be. Should they be worried? Should they not be worried? And I think they decided that they realized that they couldn't be entirely hands-off about that stuff when they ended up having to sue Warner Brothers.
Sure.
They did, because Warner Brothers released a series of Lord of the Rings themed slot machines.
Oh.
And it was really bad. And they were like, okay, no, you're not doing that. And so they had to
take it back. We can't do that anymore.
They took the machines off the market, and I think it's more of a desire to be in on the process of just knowing what's coming out. In the years since then, what you've seen is a lot of Weta Workshop and Weta Digital releasing its own props and stuff from the movies, but without a Warner Brothers logo on it.
Sure.
But even now, you're still seeing Trivial Pursuits, and I just bought a brand new game by Ravensburger, which is a storybook board game of Lord of the Rings.
Okay.
So it plays like, are you familiar with co-op games like Forbidden Island or Forbidden Desert?
I love those. I have both of them.
Yes, it is very similar, where you are playing against the game.
Okay, cool.
And you are not playing.
Do you take the place of the Fellowship? Are you the Fellowship in trying to?
You are the Fellowship, but you are not playing specific characters in the Fellowship.
Sure.
You are taking turns moving the tokens across the board and trying to get them to complete their objectives without being killed or without the ring corrupting you.
That's so cool.
Yeah, I
love stuff like that.
It's every page of the. You know what? I'm going to pull it out and show you.
We'll have to do it. Yeah, I like those types of things are the things that I want to get more into and start investing in, because that's super fun. I love the types of things where you get to like participate in the experience of Lord of the Rings, even if it's outside of the Lord of the Rings. Like that's exactly the kind of thing that I want. And Josh knows how much I love games, so
what you're seeing nowadays is a lot of weird things where people are motivated by various different things. A lot of people some are motivated by just making money, some are motivated by making money and creating things about Tolkien because they love him, and some are about expanding the franchise. So Warner Brothers very much did this attempt where they were hoping to flood the market with any Lord of the Rings content would only be Warner Brothers Lord of the Rings. So
Sure.
if you'll notice the game does not say Warner Brothers anywhere on it, but if you look at the logo, the logo is very obviously the Lord of the Rings by Warner Brothers, by
title,
the New Line Cinema. So if you see this logo on anything in the store, what you're buying is merchandise based on the movies.
Got it.
So it's still good. I mean, it is good, but if you see any other version of that logo, then what you're seeing is someone who has gone through Embracer and purchased the rights to make something based on the books.
Got it. Okay.
So what I love about this is the game board. It's a storybook.
That's so fun.
And so here's the fun thing. This is the storybook. This is actually the game board. So if you open it up, this is your first game board, and there's different objectives and different things to do. When you've completed it, which takes about 20 minutes, you go on to the next chapter, and the game changes.
Oh, that's so fun.
And now you have to do something different. Yeah, and then it takes so you can choose to play it any number of ways. So then there's the next chapter, and as the chapters go on, they get more and more complex.
Of course.
So the last chapter is the final battle.
Oh, look at
But yeah, those are kind of some of the things I want to do on the podcast, where we'll have episodes where we're playing one of the board games, or we'll have episodes where I'll literally just have the stream pointed down at a table and we'll be talking about Magic the Gathering and how to play that. And I'm going to have people on here to talk about calligraphy and illuminated texts. I actually have someone who makes them, who is interested
so cool.
in popping up. He's... if he's watching, or if you see any of this later, I want to have him on because I also want to talk about one of the lesser-known works of Tolkien called Leaf by Niggle. It's one of the minor stories that he wrote, part of the recently released as under the title Tales of the Perilous Realm. So it's going to be really cool. I think I'm going to have some reading days. I think I'm going to take people through... the audiobooks have been just re-released. Have you seen any of that, Matt?
Not yet, no.
Okay. During COVID, Andy Serkis, who played Gollum in the Lord of the Rings movies, Andy Serkis read the Hobbit on a live stream during COVID, and it was a 13.5-hour live stream. 13 hours straight.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And he read through the entire book in one sitting, including the voices. That was loved.
Wow.
That was loved so much by everybody that Audible picked it up, and he re-recorded. He recorded all of The Hobbit, including all the different character voices, on Audible.com.
Oh my
so
goodness.
that is released already, and then he went on to do all 3 Lord of the Rings books as well.
That man is a legend. What an incredible person.
Unabridged. Each of the Lord of the Rings books is between 15 and 20 hours long.
Oh my goodness.
Incredible. He did all of these amazing voices, some of them based off of the movies, but most of them based off of the movies / some of the interpretations that a lot of people have had of what they should sound like in the books. Including the fact that he put all of the songs to music and sang them.
Wow.
Yeah. His Tom Bombadil is flawless.
Oh my gosh, that's incredible.
Yeah, and he did an incredible a way of getting across the fact that Tom Bombadil speaks in meter. He speaks in a metered, almost stanza-like way, even when he's not actually singing a song in the book, and you don't pick that up till you listen to him. I'd never picked it up. I'd never picked it up, the amount of syllables he uses in his sentences. And so when he plays Tom Bombadil, even when he's not singing, he's sing-songing it. Which is
that's so fun.
He does an amazing job. He just finished the Silmarillion on audiobook, unabridged.
That had to have been a project.
I'm like, that is insane.
My goodness.
And
that had to have been a project.
For the most part, too, his Elvish how he pronounces the Elvish names is pretty spot on. Like, you could tell that he had to do some studying for that. So it's exciting. I've read The Lord of the Rings several times, but my last time reading through was about 3 years ago, so I'm going through all of the audiobooks of The Lord of the Rings, so I'm figuring I can just talk about them one chapter at a time.
Let's do it.
I need to share the link of it, but there's another Twitch channel where the Tolkien professor is actually doing that right now with the Fellowship of the Ring. He's doing that page by page.
Cool.
Where he's literally reading page by page from the books, and then people are live commenting and talking about the different implications of the character development, how the story evolved, and different things with the Tolkien professor, which is amazing. So there's a lot of different ways to stay connected, but I'm going to do that. But I'm going to have more guests on here. We're going to be talking about everything from art to literature to weapons and armor, and I would love, Matt, for you to come back and let's like get into some actual D&D stuff and some of how the mechanics of 5e Lord of the Rings works when it comes to soft magic and versus hard magic.
Let's do it.
How some of that is related to D&D, and I would love to keep doing this.
Let's do it. I'm gonna invest in those new books then, so we can get them out and we can run some mock adventures.
The first one is out.
That'd be so cool.
Yeah. So the first starter kit is out. So you can get the rule book at any game store or online, and then the first starter kit is out. But you have to do, I believe, the Lord of the Rings role playing is its name. Anything that you come across that says Adventures in Middle Earth, that is the older unofficial version, which is not a bad thing to have. But if you're looking for the newest and the new official version, it's called Lord of the Rings 5e role playing.
That makes sense.
So,
I found it. I'll have it for next time. Ready to rumble.
That'll be awesome. Who is, hey. Oh, interesting. Hey, man, we've been streaming long enough, we're getting ads in the chat. Let's go.
That's hilarious.
I'm brand new to Twitch, so I'm just looking at it going, that's an ad.
That's how you know.
I think we will go ahead and wrap up for today, but here's what I'm going to do. If you are watching, check out the About page on the Twitch channel, which is going to have all of the details of the different stuff that we are trying to connect people with. I'm going to keep posting links. Check out our Facebook group, even if you're not in the Wisconsin area, because we do things like marathons and meetups and fun stuff like that. And if you're interested in being on the stream, all you have to do is jump on our Discord. We have got plenty of different chats in the Discord that you can get involved in. Check on our announcements and look for our next stream, because we're going to be setting up a stream schedule where I'll be jumping on in some casual ways throughout the week, but then we're going to have big episodes where we have guests on and talk about specific topics. So we're really excited to get this thing started, and yeah, can't wait to see where this goes.
Same. It's going to be a good time. It was an honor being able to join you for number one, my friend. This was so cool.
It was so cool. So thanks for joining me, Matt. I'm going to go ahead and end the stream. But you can also check the link to our YouTube page. Every stream will be posted after the fact to YouTube as is, with no editing. So you can watch and see and catch up on any of the discussion that was had. So obviously today was a lot of introductions and a lot of letting you know how this is going to go. But future streams are going to have a lot more of our interview guests. They're going to have a lot more stuff to offer and a lot more cool conversations. So check us out on our Twitch page and check out all of our info. And we will see you guys all soon. So I'm going to go ahead and end the stream now. We'll see you guys soon. Thank you so much for joining us.
Peace out, everybody.